"You have 10 minutes to return my original ZL1 engine," Lena Harrow said. "When that clock reaches 0, my men start tagging every lift, tool, and engine in this garage." Her attorney slapped a red legal notice onto Daniel Cross's tool cabinet. 2 security contractors moved toward the equipment while a camera streamed everything live. Behind Lena sat her black 1969 Camaro. For 3 days, Daniel had inspected it for an upcoming auction. Now its rare aluminum 427 was gone, replaced by an ordinary iron block painted black. Lena stepped closer. A mechanic drowning in debt suddenly gets access to an engine worth more than his entire building. Don't insult me by calling that a coincidence. Daniel's 18-year-old son, Mason, stood beside the office monitor. Thousands of viewers were already watching security guards prepare to inventory the garage his father had spent 30 years building. Then Mason dragged the arrival footage backward. "Dad, look at this." The Camaro crossed the shop entrance on the day it arrived. Beneath the exhaust manifold, black paint had already chipped from the block, and a hardened drip ran down the side. Mason enlarged the frame. Breath. Under the paint was dull gray metal, not the bright aluminum of an original ZL1. Daniel turned the monitor toward Lena. "That substitute engine was already inside your Camaro before it entered my garage." For the first time, Lena stopped smiling. But she did not call off the security team. Instead, she looked at her attorney. "Preserve that computer. Nobody leaves with a hard drive." Mason stepped between them and the monitor. Lena pointed at the frozen image. "Because if that video has been altered, your father didn't just steal my engine." She glanced at the live camera. Breath. He manufactured his own alibi. The countdown continued as the security contractors closed in. Daniel realized the only image capable of saving his garage was about to become the strongest evidence against him. Cross Motor Service stood in a converted bus depot outside St. Louis. Daniel had rented one bay there at 24 and bought the building at 41 after years of fleet work, insurance inspections, and late-night engine jobs. At 58, he no longer chased every restoration that promised a magazine photograph. He specialized in pre-purchase examinations for people who wanted facts before emotion became a bid. His wife had left when Mason was 6. There had been no dramatic betrayal, only 2 people who could not survive the same years in the same way. Daniel raised Mason above the shop office, where the boy learned that a clean timestamp could matter as much as a clean wrench. Mason loved cars, but he did not like tearing them apart. He liked the record around them, photographs, shipping labels, old broadcasts, and the tiny inconsistencies adults missed when they were certain. That difference had caused arguments. Daniel believed every intake inspection should begin with hands on metal. Mason believed it should begin before the truck arrived, with cameras synchronized and storage media verified. Daniel called some of that excessive. Mason called Daniel's carbon copy forms a museum exhibit. The Harrow Camaro proved both of them partly right. Lena Harrow was chief executive of Harrow Collection Group, a company that purchased, authenticated, insured, and auctioned high-value American cars. She was 51 and carried herself with the control of someone who had built a business in rooms where collectors assumed she was an assistant. Her company had acquired the black Camaro through Victor Sloan, a broker with 30 years of auction contacts and a reputation for finding cars before families knew how rare they were. The vehicle was represented as one of the limited 1,969 Camaros, originally equipped with Chevrolet's all-aluminum 427 cubic-inch ZL1 engine. The claim mattered enormously. An ordinary big-block Camaro could be valuable. A documented ZL1 car with its original engine occupied a different market entirely. Lena bought the car subject to final inspection before a national auction. Victor recommended Cross Motor Service because Daniel was independent and local. The assignment was narrow: inspect the car without disassembling the sealed engine, verify operating condition, photograph visible identifiers, and report material discrepancies. The car arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in an enclosed carrier. Victor's representative, Gavin Rusk, stood beside the driver and hurried Daniel through the handoff. Rain threatened. The driver had another pickup, and the Camaro could not remain outside. Daniel signed the exterior condition sheet, noted that the engine bay surfaces had been heavily refinished, and moved the vehicle indoors. That was his mistake. He photographed the car from 12 standard angles, but he did not insist on removing the low-light shield and capturing the block side before signing receipt. The engine area was visible only in the wide overhead camera and Mason's doorway camera. Daniel planned to take detail photographs during inspection. The hood was not sealed then. The prohibition against disassembly meant he could inspect visible casting areas, but could not remove the heads, pan, or engine. On Wednesday, he found thick black paint over the block where bare aluminum should normally have been visible. A stamped pad looked recently dressed. Several accessory brackets matched the ZL1 configuration, but brackets could move from one engine to another. Daniel wrote, "Breath. Engine identity, not established. Surface coating prevents confirmation. Recommend controlled cleaning and specialist authentication before catalog claim." Victor objected immediately. He said some race-prepared aluminum blocks had been painted black for appearance and corrosion control. Daniel answered that aluminum did not rust like iron, and the paint appeared intended to hide the surface, not preserve it. He did not accuse anyone of a swap. He refused to certify originality. Lena accepted the caution but needed the car returned for an insurer's inspection on Friday. She instructed Daniel to finish the non-invasive report. He checked compression, fluid condition, cold start, brake operation, suspension, and road behavior on a 5-mile monitored loop. As part of his standard high-value inspection procedure, he also sealed and retained a small oil sample under the Camaro's case number. The engine ran strongly. Nothing in performance proved what metal sat under the paint. The Camaro left Cross Motor Service at 4:12 Friday afternoon. Daniel handed Gavin the signed report and copied Lena directly. Mason filmed the departure, including an uninterrupted view from the lift bay to the carrier. Gavin signed the outgoing condition form with one handwritten note. Vehicle received. No external damage. At 9 the next morning, Lena's insurer called her from the auction facility. A portable analyzer and a cleaned inspection window showed iron where the original ZL1 block should have been aluminum. The casting configuration did not match the authenticated records. Someone had installed a lower-value engine and dressed it to resemble the rare unit. Victor supplied Lena with a purchase photograph showing an unpainted aluminum block 2 weeks before the car went to Daniel. He also produced a custody summary stating that Cross Motor Service was the only independent location where the Camaro had remained overnight. Lena's board faced an insurance notification deadline and a catalog already distributed to registered bidders. If the original engine had been stolen, her company needed a police report. If the acquisition file had been fraudulent, the auction house could suspend Harrow Collection Group's consignments. Victor urged her to act decisively before Daniel had time to move the block. The loan on Daniel's building gave Lena leverage. Cross Motor Service had financed a roof replacement through a commercial lender 3 years earlier. Harrow Collection Group later purchased the note as part of a small specialty lending portfolio. The security agreement covered certain financed shop equipment after a defined default, and Lena's attorney believed a theft claim could trigger a protective inventory and court petition. It did not give her the right to seize the garage on command. The red notice announced an inventory pending legal action, not immediate ownership. But cameras, security uniforms, and legal language made the distinction invisible to viewers watching live. When Lena entered the shop that Saturday, she believed speed protected the company and preserved evidence. She also believed Daniel had concealed a serious conflict. He owed money to a company whose rare engine he had inspected. In her view, he had motive, access, tools, and 3 unobserved nights. Dale had one accurate answer and one uncomfortable fact. He had not stolen the engine. He also had failed to capture the close intake image that would have ended the allegation before it began. Breth Mason's frozen frame did not prove what engine the Camaro carried. It proved that the painted, chipped block existed before the car entered their custody. The entire case now depended on whether that frame was original. Lena's attorney, Peter Vale, asked Mason to step away from the computer. "Do not touch the keyboard again." "It's our system," Mason said, "and it may contain evidence in a felony investigation." Daniel moved between them. "You can preserve it under a written protocol. You can't take my son's computer because you brought security guards." Peter said they would seek an emergency order. Daniel called his attorney, Ruth Calder, who advised him to isolate the recorder from the network, maintain power, and allow no one to create or delete data until a neutral examiner arrived. Lena agreed, but only if the examiner came that day. Mason objected. The recorder stored more than the Camaro video. It held customer arrivals, employee schedules, and several weeks of shop activity. Shutting it down for imaging would halt their operations and expose private customer information. Then, "Give us the file," Peter said. "A file I export now is exactly what you'll call edited later," Mason replied. Daniel heard his own stubbornness in the answer, redirected through a skill he had underestimated. He told Mason to follow the neutral process, even if it closed the shop for the day. "We lose work," Mason said. "We lose more if the record can't survive inspection." The live stream ended at Lena's order. She had begun it to show investors and consignors that Harrow Collection Group confronted suspected theft. Continuing after the frozen frame would turn evidence preservation into public theater. The recording remained online, however, and thousands of viewers had already seen her accuse Daniel. Ruth Calder arrived within 40 minutes. She read the security agreement, photographed the red notice, and told Peter the inventory could proceed only by consent or court order. Daniel consented to a visual count of the specifically financed equipment, provided nothing was tagged, disconnected, or removed. He did not want Lena to later claim he had obstructed asset preservation. That decision cost him publicly. Online clips showed security contractors listing his engine hoist, boring equipment, and diagnostic cabinets. Viewers assumed seizure had begun. 2 customers canceled appointments before noon. The neutral digital examiner arrived from a regional forensic laboratory at 1:15. Her name was Dr. Alana Pierce. She had no history with either company. Ruth and Peter signed the examination scope, preserve the recorder, verify system time, create a forensic image, extract the Camaro files, and report any indication of editing or clock manipulation. Unrelated customer video would remain sealed. Alana began by comparing the recorder clock with an external time source. It ran 11 seconds slow, consistent with Mason's weekly log. She photographed the hardware, calculated digital fingerprints for the storage volumes, and created 2 verified images while both attorneys watched. The original recorder remained at the shop under a tamper seal. Mason handed over his synchronization notebook. Every Monday, he recorded the difference between the camera system, office clock, and internet time server. Daniel had teased him about the habit. Now the notebook explained exactly why the arrival video showed 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 18 seconds, while the carrier's electronic gate receipt showed 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. Alana reviewed the file structure. The doorway camera, recorded in fixed segments, created automatically by the system. The frame with the chipped paint sat inside a segment whose encoding pattern, file sequence, and neighboring timestamps matched every other camera segment from that hour. There was no rendering history, broken sequence, or export artifact in the source volume. "Can you say the image shows iron?" Lena asked. "No," Alana replied. "Breath. I can say this frame was recorded by that camera at the logged time. It is not the product of a later video edit. Material interpretation is outside my field." That narrow answer mattered. Experts who stayed inside their authority made the chain stronger. At 4:30, Alana issued a preliminary preservation statement. The frozen frame was authentic to the recorder. Full analysis would take several days. Lena ordered the security contractors to leave. She did not withdraw the accusation. "An authentic frame can still show an engine your shop installed before the car crossed the doorway," she said. "Your building has another entrance." Sigh. Daniel almost dismissed the theory as desperate, but it was possible in the abstract. The rear service door opened to an alley, and the Camaro could have entered there before being staged at the front. Daniel had not been present during every minute on Tuesday. Mason opened the multi-camera timeline. The alley camera showed the rear door continuously. The carrier's arrival appeared on the street camera. Luis, the shop foreman, appeared on the bay camera, guiding the Camaro directly from the carrier through the front entrance. The views overlapped, but proving continuity required matching them to independent records. Daniel asked Ruth to request the carrier's electronic log, toll records, and original delivery media. Peter requested them too. For the first time that day, both sides needed the same evidence. The carrier company provided a signed pickup ticket, GPS track, and onboard weight ticket from a certified truck scale. The scale record surprised everyone. After fuel and cargo adjustments, the loaded tractor trailer weighed 112 pounds more on its drive to Cross Motor Service than it had in an authenticated transport record 6 months earlier. An all-aluminum ZL1 block weighed substantially less than a comparable cast-iron big block. The difference did not prove an engine identity by itself. Fuel, tools, and scale tolerances could distort total vehicle weight. But the direction mattered. If someone had replaced aluminum with iron before Tuesday's delivery, an increase around 100 pounds was plausible. If Daniel had made the swap after the inbound weigh ticket, the Camaro should have left his shop heavier than it arrived. There was an outbound truck scale record from Friday. The carrier had weighed at the same certified station before entering the interstate. After adjustments for fuel burned and one removed pallet, the Camaro's calculated axle contribution matched the inbound figure within the scale's tolerance. The car had not gained the expected weight while inside Daniel's garage. Victor attacked the calculation. He said assigning part of a combined trailer weight to one vehicle was unreliable and noted that the earlier authenticated record came from a different scale. Daniel agreed that no honest expert would identify an engine from gross transport weight. The records were corroboration, not a verdict. Then stop presenting them like proof, Victor said during a conference call. I'm presenting them like weight, Daniel replied. The video shows appearance. The scale shows no material change here. Neither one tells us where the original engine went. That restraint shifted Lena. Daniel had every reason to exaggerate evidence that protected his garage, but he refused to turn a clue into a conclusion. On Sunday morning, the police detective assigned to the theft report visited Cross Motor Service. Detective Howard Bell did not arrive with sirens or an arrest warrant. He reviewed the intake forms, photographed the sealed recorder, and asked Daniel to account for every person with access during the Camaro's stay. Daniel listed himself, Mason, Luis, and 2 technicians. He also disclosed that Gavin Rusk, Victor's representative, remained in the shop for 90 minutes after delivery and returned Thursday evening with an additional document packet. Gavin had access to the engine bay while Daniel was on a road call, though Luis remained nearby. Could he have removed an engine? Howard asked. Not without a lift, time, noise, and help, Daniel said. He could have photographed it or changed a tag. Mason produced the visitor log. Gavin's Thursday entry had no departure signature, another weakness. Daniel's procedure depended on visitors signing themselves out, and Gavin had not. Howard asked whether Mason could identify the time Gavin left. Mason found him on the parking lot camera at 7:42 p.m., carrying a flat document case, not an engine part. The absence of a signature did not hide his movement, but Daniel added it to the list of intake failures he would have to correct whether he won or lost. The detective inspected the shop's drains, waste bins, shipping area, and engine storage. Every customer engine had a work order and photographs. None matched the ZL one. Howard collected no property. He told both parties that the original block's serial and casting information would be entered into a national stolen property database, but warned Lena that a contractual authenticity dispute was not automatically a theft committed at the last shop. By Monday, the allegation had damaged Daniel more than the legal process had. A classic car forum posted his home address. Someone painted THIEF across the side door overnight. Mason found Daniel at 6 in the morning scrubbing the word with solvent. Leave it for the police report, Mason said. They photographed it. Customers don't need to drive past it all day. Mason took the rag from him. Breath. You're cleaning their accusation before you fix our intake process. Daniel stopped. The remark was harsh and correct. He had spent 30 years believing a reputation came from doing good work. He had not understood that high-value custody required proving when the work began, what condition existed, and who controlled every access point. They left the last gray shadow of the word on the brick and went inside to write a new temporary procedure. No vehicle above the insurer's threshold would enter until every camera view was confirmed. A second employee witnessed the handoff. All accessible identifiers were photographed, and exceptions were signed by both parties. The rear door received an electronic contact log. Visitors would be escorted rather than trusted to complete a paper line. The procedure could not clear Daniel of the current claim. It admitted that Lena's criticism of his process had merit. That honesty gave it weight. At noon, Lena offered Daniel a settlement through the attorneys. Harrow Collection Group would withdraw its default notice, pay his canceled work losses, and state that the evidence did not establish theft by Cross Motor Service. In exchange, Daniel and Mason would sign confidentiality terms, surrender all public comment, and agree that the source of the engine substitution remained undetermined. The offer would save the garage. It would not restore Daniel's name. The phrase, "did not establish theft," was weaker than the live accusation that he had 10 minutes to return an engine. Ruth Calder advised him that litigation could consume years, and a public retraction might never reach the audience that saw the original clip. Sigh. "This is enough to survive," she said. "It may be the rational choice." Daniel asked Mason what he wanted. "I want them to say the video is real," Mason replied. "The examiner will say that. I want them to say it where they called me a liar." The settlement also required Mason to withdraw a complaint he had drafted about the public use of his name and image. Daniel could accept for himself. He could not trade away his son's record to protect a building. He rejected the offer and proposed a narrower agreement. Cross Motor Service would cooperate fully with a neutral chain of custody review. Harrow Collection Group would suspend, not enforce, the loan default during that review. When the review established the earliest documented appearance of the substitute engine, both parties would publish the same verified timeline. No one would be required to waive claims unrelated to the facts. Lena accepted after one change. The review would cover Daniel's entire custody period, including employee devices used for Camaro photographs. Mason would have to surrender his phone image data to the neutral examiner under a privacy filter. Daniel wanted to refuse. Mason's phone contained family messages and college applications that had nothing to do with the car. Mason read the scope and signed consent himself. Breath. "If I built the record, I can't ask everyone else to trust the part I keep private." The midpoint choice cost them another week of business. The shop computer system, employee phones, entry logs, and camera archives were examined. Customers were notified that certain intake images had been sealed for review. One collector moved 2 cars elsewhere. Daniel paid his technicians even while bays stood empty. The review confirmed no undocumented engine movement, heavy equipment operation, or after-hours vehicle access during the Camaro's stay. A smart electrical monitor installed after the shop's roof loan insurance review showed no power draw from the engine hoist circuit after Tuesday morning. Waste hauler photographs showed no crate or large metal component leaving. Cell location data placed every employee account holder where their logs indicated. Again, absence of evidence did not identify the real thief. It narrowed the window. Breath. Mason returned to Victor's purchase photograph. The image supposedly showed the original aluminum ZL, one engine 2 weeks before delivery. It had been printed into the acquisition binder and forwarded as a compressed file. Mason asked for the original camera file. Victor said the seller had provided only the image and had since become unreachable. That answer made the photograph less reliable, but not false. Mason studied reflections instead of pixels. A red warehouse column appeared in the polished valve cover. On a shelf behind the Camaro sat a white shipping label with a blue diagonal stripe. "I've seen that stripe," he said. Daniel remembered Gavin's Thursday document packet. One page carried a freight company logo with the same diagonal design. Victor used that carrier for engine crates. Ruth subpoenaed nothing. She had no such power. She sent a preservation request to the freight company and asked Lena, as a contracting customer, to authorize release of records tied to Victor's account. Lena hesitated. The request would expose other client shipments and could damage a long relationship before wrongdoing was proven. Daniel offered a limited search, date range, pickup origin, package category, and destination, reviewed first by the neutral examiner. Lena approved it. Breath. The freight records showed an engine crate collected from Victor's private warehouse 2 days before the Camaro arrived at Cross Motor Service. The bill described the contents as display equipment and listed a declared weight of 496 pounds. It traveled to a storage facility in Tulsa under the name of a restoration subcontractor Victor had used before. The timing fit. The weight fit an assembled aluminum big block more closely than a display stand. But a shipping description and weight still did not prove the crate held Lena's engine. Victor called the record irrelevant. He brokered engines and memorabilia constantly. He accused Lena of breaching client confidentiality and Daniel of steering the review toward a competitor's property. "Then, identify the display equipment," Lena said. Victor promised an invoice by the next morning. None arrived. Detective Howard Bell used the freight record to apply for a search warrant, but a judge declined the first request. The evidence showed a suspicious shipment, not probable cause that stolen property was inside the crate. Howard needed a stronger connection to the Camaro. Mason found it in a detail nobody had enlarged because everyone was focused on the engine. In Victor's purchase photograph, the Camaro's left hood hinge carried a fresh white inspection dot. In Daniel's arrival video, the same dot was present, but a second black alignment mark crossed it. The black mark matched photographs from the seller's archived listing taken 3 months earlier. Victor's alleged recent purchase photograph lacked weathering on the white dot and showed a background warehouse Victor claimed not to have used until after acquisition. The photograph's file history offered the next step. Alana Pierce recovered an embedded thumbnail from an email cache supplied by Lena's acquisition manager. Breath. The image had been exported from a larger photograph. Its original creation date was 11 months earlier, not 2 weeks before delivery. The visible date in Victor's binder came from the email attachment, not the camera. Victor had not necessarily altered the photograph. He had represented an old image as current proof. Lena gave him one chance to correct the record. She called with both attorneys present and asked whether he had personally seen the aluminum block after Harrow Collection Group wired the purchase funds. Victor answered indirectly. He said the seller's provenance was impeccable, the car's value remained strong with a replacement engine, and public conflict would harm everyone. Lena asked again. Breath. I relied on the seller's documentation, he said. You signed that you physically verified the engine on June 4th. I verified the file. That distinction ended Lena's protection of him. She authorized Howard to receive the full acquisition correspondence and filed a civil action seeking preservation of the Tulsa crate and Victor's warehouse records. Her insurer joined, giving the court a direct property and coverage interest. This time the judge issued a limited order preventing movement or opening of the crate, except under court-supervised inspection. The criminal search question remained separate. The Tulsa Storage Company sealed the bay and transmitted photographs. On the crate side was a scuffed orange stencil, partly covered by a new shipping label. Daniel recognized the stencil style from the Camaro's historical race team photographs. ZL1 owners sometimes reused purpose-built shipping crates for decades, but recognition was not identification. The court scheduled a supervised opening in 4 days. Lena wanted Daniel to travel to Tulsa as a technical observer. Daniel refused. Traveling would close the shop again, and appearing beside the engine could allow critics to claim he had influenced its identification. Mason proposed a compromise. Daniel would observe the inspection through a secure live video feed from the St. Louis Credential Review and submit technical questions through the court officer. Daniel agreed on conditions. The court would appoint the authentication specialist. All parties could attend. The crate would be photographed, weighed, and sampled before anything was cleaned. Daniel could identify the physical marks that required examination, but he would not handle the engine or direct the specialist's conclusions. During the 4-day wait, Victor launched his counterattack. He released a statement claiming Daniel had failed to document the engine at intake, concealed an alley entrance, and benefited from a debt dispute with Lena. Each statement contained a piece of truth. Daniel's close photographs were late. The alley existed. The loan created motive for both sides. Daniel did not answer with insults. He published the neutral examiner's limited findings, the carrier's verified custody times, and his original inspection sentence stating engine identity, not established. He also published a correction. An early interview had called the inbound and outbound weights exact. In fact, they agreed only within the certified tolerance after documented adjustments. The correction cost him support online. Some people treated precision as retreat. Older mechanics and investigators understood it differently. A record became trustworthy when its owner corrected the part that exceeded the evidence. The auction house scheduled a public credential review for the same Friday as the crate opening. Harrow Collection Group had to show why its consignor status should remain active after advertising the Camaro as numbers matching. Lena asked for a delay. The auction house refused. Its bidders had received the catalog claim. The correction could not wait for convenient timing. At 8 Friday morning, the Tulsa inspection began under continuous video. The crate was weighed before opening. Its gross weight matched the freight record within 2 pounds. Court officer Dana Mills cut the numbered seal and lifted the lid with the storage manager. Breath. Beneath fitted foam lay an assembled aluminum 427 engine wrapped in oiled paper. No one called it the missing ZL1. The appointed specialist, Professor Samuel Reed, documented casting features, assembly stamps, repair marks, and material composition. A historical photograph of Lena's Camaro engine showed a welded repair near one motor mount boss and 3 small punch marks beside it. Breath. The engine in the crate carried the same irregular weld contour and punch pattern. Those marks were useful because they resulted from physical history, not a number that could simply be restamped. Samuel then exposed the protected casting area under court authorization. Breath. The number matched the archived owner record and Harrow Collection Group's purchase file. A second examiner independently read it before the result was announced. Metallurgical screening confirmed the block was aluminum of the expected period composition. Old oil residue matched the fluid sample retained from the Camaro's pre-sale service, though the laboratory cautioned that oil comparison could support common service history, not unique identity. The chain no longer depended on one VIN derivative, old damage, punch marks, casting configuration, archived photographs, material, shipping time, and court-controlled possession. All of it converged. At the St. Louis auction review, Lena watched the crate feed on a large screen. Daniel and Mason sat at a side table with Ruth. Victor attended by video with his attorney. The review panel asked Lena why Cross Motor Service had been accused before the intake record was examined. "Because I treated the last uncontrolled custody point as the most likely crime scene," she said. "I had motive evidence, access, a missing asset, and a reporting deadline. I also had a broker's certification that I did not independently verify. I acted before separating those facts." The panel asked whether she still alleged Daniel stole the engine. Lena turned toward the same camera that had carried her 10-minute threat. Clear throat. "No. Cross Motor Service received the Camaro with the substitute engine already installed. Daniel Cross and Mason Cross did not remove the original ZL1 engine. My accusation was wrong." Peter Vale removed the red inventory notice from the evidence packet and marked it withdrawn. Harrow Collection Group filed a release of the claimed loan default and paid the lost work amount specified in the neutral review agreement. The loan itself did not vanish. Daniel had never asked for a gift. Lena refinanced it at the existing rate without the disputed cross-default claim and removed her company as servicer, so future business conflict could not become property leverage. The auction panel imposed consequences. It suspended Harrow Collection Group from representing any car as numbers matching for 90 days, required third-party engine authentication for 12 months, and ordered a correction to every registered bidder who received the Camaro catalog. The company could continue selling cars accurately described as replacement engine or identity unverified. The correction went out that afternoon. It did not bury the mistake below promotional language. The first paragraph named the Camaro, withdrew the originality claim, and stated that Harrow Collection Group had wrongly accused the inspecting garage before completing custody verification. Registered bidders received the frozen frame, the examiner's finding, and a link to the public review record. Several collectors praised the transparency. Others withdrew consignments anyway. Lena's company lost a featured collection and 3 months of preferred auction placement. Her board reduced her performance bonus and placed vendor authentication under a compliance officer who reported independently to the audit committee. She retained operational authority but could no longer approve exceptions to the new engine verification rule by herself. That was the correction Daniel had wanted from the beginning. Not humiliation, and not a larger personality defeating a smaller one. The same urgency that had allowed Victor's certificate to substitute for inspection could no longer be repeated by a chief executive under deadline. Daniel's repair took longer. The public retraction reached bidders and industry professionals, but the original 10-minute clip continued circulating without it. Search results paired his face with the word stealing. A local fleet manager who had known him for 15 years still asked whether police had cleared everything up. Daniel learned to answer precisely. Sigh. The verified timeline showed the substitute engine arrived before our custody. The original was recovered from a crate shipped by the broker. The criminal case is still pending. He refused to say he had been completely cleared because that phrase suggested an authority had once possessed evidence of guilt. He also refused to let pride make every conversation a trial. Customers who wanted the record received it. Customers who wanted gossip were shown the door. Mason faced a different consequence. He had applied for an information security scholarship at a state university. The selection committee found the accusation during its background review and requested an explanation. Mason drafted a 3-page defense of the video. Daniel read it. Sigh. Then he crossed out every sentence that argued he was a good person. "They can't verify good," Daniel said. "Give them the examiner's report, the custody timeline, and the public retraction." Mason shortened the response to 6 paragraphs and attached primary records. The committee postponed the award until the legal review ended, which meant he had to decide whether to enroll without knowing how much debt he would take on. Daniel offered to use the anticipated settlement. Mason refused. "If the money comes because they used my name, I'll decide after it exists. I don't want you promising it twice." That was another of Daniel's habits exposed by the case. He had treated future income as if hard work made it certain. The roof loan, the postponed maintenance, and the balloon schedule all came from his belief that next month's jobs could repair this month's risk. He and Mason met with a financial counselor and built two plans, one with the scholarship and one without it. Mason enrolled at the local community college for a year, transferring later if the numbers worked. The choice was not a sentimental surrender. It gave him access to a digital evidence certification program and allowed him to keep building the intake system. The scholarship committee eventually restored his eligibility after the public record was complete, but Mason accepted only the following year's award. He had already paid the current tuition from his shop wages. Meanwhile, the insurer conducted its own examination of the Camaro acquisition. Its investigator, Janice Morrow, began with the money rather than the metal. Purchase funds had moved from Harrow Collection Group to an escrow account controlled by Victor's brokerage. The seller received most of the payment. A separate authentication reserve moved to a company formed 6 weeks earlier by Gavin's brother-in-law. The reserve amount closely matched the price paid for the substitute iron engine. Bank records later obtained through legal process connected the purchase to Gavin. Paint and accessory invoices were billed to the same new company. None of that proved when the original engine left the Camaro, but it established a financial route that the acquisition file never disclosed. Victor argued the reserve paid for transport, insurance, and contingency work. Janice asked for work orders. The documents produced had sequential invoice numbers dated out of order, and the listed shop address belonged to a mailbox center. She referred the discrepancies to the insurer's Special Investigations Unit and Detective Howard Bell. Daniel was not part of that financial investigation, which frustrated reporters who wanted him to narrate every turn. He knew only the records he had been authorized to see. When asked whether the crate discovery proved Victor planned the accusation from the beginning, Daniel said it proved the engine was shipped from Victor's warehouse before Cross Motor Service received the car. Motive belonged to investigators and a court. His restraint protected the case and angered people who wanted a villain immediately. It also influenced Lena. She had used certainty as a management tool, believing fast confidence steadied employees and clients. Daniel showed her that a limited statement could be stronger when every word remained true after the next document arrived. 2 weeks after the public review, Lena visited the garage without an appointment. The gray shadow of the painted insult still remained on the side brick. She asked why Daniel had not covered it. "New paint over old paint doesn't explain the surface," he said. "Is that a mechanic's answer, or are you trying to make me feel worse?" "It's the answer. We tested a remover on one section. It damaged the original brick. We're waiting for a mason who knows the material." Lena looked at the wall for a long moment. "I would have repainted the whole side Monday." "Breath, that's why you bought a painted engine." It was the sharpest thing Daniel said to her. He regretted the cruelty before the sentence ended, but not the lesson. Lena accepted it without defense. Then she handed him a copy of the board's new exception policy. Every material authenticity uncertainty had to remain visible in the catalog record until resolved. Marketing could not paint over it with a general condition phrase. "We wrote your line into the form," she said. "It isn't my line. It's what uncertainty means. You charge for everything else." "Let me give you credit for that," Daniel declined. A basic professional duty did not become intellectual property because a company had ignored it. He did agree to review the policy for practical gaps at his normal hourly rate. The criminal process advanced slowly. Victor and Gavin were entitled to challenge the search, the records, and the meaning of the shipment. At a preliminary hearing, their attorneys argued that the ZL-1 engine could have been stored in Tulsa for legitimate safekeeping, and that no witness had seen either man remove it. The prosecution presented the crate timeline. The old photograph represented as current, the undisclosed reserve, and communications about installing a display block before the insurer's examination. One message from Gavin read, "Black finish hides the obvious until the car clears local." The defense argued local referred to transport inspection, not Daniel's garage, and that the message lacked the word engine. The judge did not decide guilt. She found enough evidence for the charges to proceed and maintained the property preservation order. Daniel left the courtroom less satisfied than online viewers expected. The process had named a serious question, not answered it. He understood why Lena had wanted a 10-minute resolution. Waiting for lawful proof was expensive and emotionally incomplete. On the courthouse steps, a reporter asked whether Daniel hoped Victor went to prison. Daniel looked at Mason before answering. "Breath. I hope the evidence is tested under the same rules that protected us," he said. That statement ended several planned interviews. It also became the sentence older customers repeated when they returned to cross-motor service. Men who had spent careers around grievances, insurance claims, labor hearings, and military investigations understood that fair rules mattered most when anger felt deserved. The insurer settled the property portion under the policy, reduced by Lena's deductible and her company's verification failure, then pursued recovery against the responsible parties. Lena received no fantasy windfall. She bore part of the cost created by her own weak control. Before Daniel accepted another high-value car, Luis tested the new procedure by entering through the alley, moving a covered stand, and blocking a camera. Each act triggered a record, except the blocked view, which still allowed a manual continuation. Mason removed that option. A required camera failure now stopped the handoff unless every party signed a visible exception. Victor's brokerage credentials were suspended, pending the criminal and civil cases. Investigators located the substitute engine's purchase invoice, paint materials, and communications, discussing a temporary display block. Prosecutors charged Victor and Gavin with offenses tied to property conversion, insurance statements, and falsified business records. Those charges remained allegations until resolved. Daniel refused every interview that asked him to declare guilt before trial. The civil evidence established enough for Harrow Collection Group to rescind the acquisition and recover insured losses subject to policy terms. The original ZL1 engine remained in secure custody until ownership claims were resolved. It did not return magically to the Camaro by the next scene. Rare engines required inspection, preservation, and a documented installation plan. Lena offered Daniel a large confidential payment for reputational harm. He declined the secrecy, not the damages. Through mediation, they agreed on a public settlement covering canceled work, legal expense, security upgrades, and Mason's documented privacy costs. The amount was reported as compensation, not a purchase price for silence. Daniel directed part of it to the employees who had lost hours during the forensic shutdown. He used another part to build a 2-lane intake bay with fixed lighting, synchronized cameras, floor scales, and a counter, where both parties signed the custody record before keys changed hands. The equipment did not make honesty automatic. It made exceptions visible. Mason designed the form. Each vehicle received a case number. Every pair of hands, every seal, every photograph, and every movement through a door acquired a time and a witness. A customer could see the full intake record without surrendering unrelated private data. Video exports were digitally fingerprinted at creation and stored in 2 independent locations. Daniel insisted on one old-fashioned field at the bottom, technician's uncertainty. A mechanic could write what remained unknown, without having the report treated as failure. That's the line you needed on the Camaro, Mason said. I had it in the report, Daniel answered. I needed it before the car came inside. Their argument about hands and records ended in a working compromise. Daniel taught Mason how tool marks, gasket edges, heat patterns, and metal surfaces created physical history. Mason taught Daniel how a file's origin, timestamp, and transfer created digital history. Neither could replace the other. 3 months later, Lena returned to cross-motor service with a different Camaro. It was an honest driver, with a replacement small block and no claim to rarity. She requested a pre-auction inspection under the new chain of custody system. At the threshold, Daniel stopped the car. Mason activated the case record. Fixed lights illuminated the engine bay, while the seller, carrier driver, Daniel, and Lena watched the same monitor. Daniel photographed every accessible casting area before signing. Mason generated the file manifest and handed each party a copy. Lena waited at the counter. No cameras followed her. When Daniel identified a casting he could not read without disassembly, he wrote "identity not verified" and asked whether she wanted to authorize the next step. Breath. Not until the owner signs, she said. Daniel nodded. That was the correct answer. The black ZL1 Camaro eventually returned after the court released its engine. Installation took months, and the history packet preserved the substitution, investigation, and recovery rather than erasing them. Harrow Collection Group did not advertise the car as untouched. It described the documented chain and allowed buyers to judge what the repaired history meant. Daniel never accepted the job of installing the engine. The criminal case made him a witness, and he wanted no new custody dispute around the central evidence. Another qualified shop performed the work under the court-approved protocol. Cross Motor Service conducted the final independent inspection. On the afternoon that inspection ended, Mason printed 2 still images. The first was the frozen arrival frame with the black drip beneath the manifold. The second showed the same side of the restored aluminum block under the new intake lights, bare and fully documented. He placed them side by side in a simple frame above the intake counter. Daniel started to object. He did not want the shop decorated with the worst accusation it had faced. Mason turned the frame over. On the back he had written, "Breath. What we knew then. What we proved later." Daniel hung it. Outside, the cameras recorded a pickup entering for brake work. Mason checked the clock and opened a fresh case record. Daniel met the customer at the threshold. Instead of waving him toward an empty bay, before a wrench turned or a signature changed hands, father and son stood on opposite sides of the same screen and verified the first frame together.